everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and Mr. James Junkin.
I am so glad to be here in this episode because I am with two people that are really, I consider to be mentors and leaders in occupational safety and health. So I don't know if I get to talk a lot because, Chris Martin and you, Dr. Martin, are people that I look up to as mentors in this field. And I think it's great to have both of you on this podcast.
Woo! And he didn't even say roll tide, Chris. He spent that time sucking up to you and I, so we better make good on this.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
Conversation here.
It's coming.
You've tempted fate, Dr. Martin.
He's I know he's going to say roll tide, but I was surprised by that, and I'm blown away. And I'm going to name my next child after him. But so let's move on here. We got Chris Martin here today, and he's going to speak with us a little bit about some pitfalls within incident investigation. He's a master at what he does. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Chris is the health safety environmental manager for Deep Blue, a privately held water infrastructure and midstream company. He spent the last 20 years of his career in oil and gas, focused on safety and environmental compliance, with 15 of those years being spent with service companies and consulting, and 5 years in corporate level HSE management with Concho. I was going to say Concho because that's like a sea creature. Earthstone Energy and now Deep Blue. Chris is passionate about bridging the disconnect between operational goals and those of HSE by working with stakeholders to increase understanding of return on investment for safe and environmentally responsible operations. His unique perspective has evolved from starting several successful businesses and decades invested in research, teaching, and speaking on dispelling the myth that safety is a financial burden to a company. Listen up, folks. Chris completed an AAS in Occupational Health and Safety Technology in 2004 through Odessa College and a BS in Occupational Safety and Health through Columbia Southern University in 2017. Go Knights.
Go Knights.
He is also a dual CSHO with TEACS and a construction site safety master through the National Center for Construction Education and Research. When not working, Chris works on mastering patience by raising 2 French bulldogs and trying to be a less inept guitar player. Chris, we need to get together because I'm teaching myself mandolin.
Well, that's quite a challenge.
So take it away, James. Let's introduce Chris.
Welcome, Chris. And before we get to our discussion today on some of the pitfalls of incident investigations based on your experience, I want to talk about the Risk Matrix powered by Veriforce and what's coming up. I'm so excited about this because we are on the move. We are headed to the Veriforce Select Client event in New Orleans, Louisiana, May 15th and 16th, and we'll be broadcasting live from the event. Roll Tide, let the good times roll, baby. That means we're going to have actual live guests and a live audience so we can have interaction and participation. Now, risks come in all forms, right? And we're going to be welcoming another good friend and also Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board member back to the podcast, Brent Kettlecamp, who is an attorney with the law firm Ogletree and Deakins, to discuss some of the legal risk around cybersecurity. So if you're a Veriforce network member, check your inbox for the in-person participation to the May 2024 Veriforce New Orleans Select Client Series event. But if you can't make the event live and you follow us on either Spotify or YouTube, rest assured it'll still be there. You can check it out as it's normally broadcast time. Welcome, Chris. You're in the Matrix, baby.
Well, that was quite a humbling introduction. So I hope I can live up to it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we appreciate your passion because you have the same passion that Dr. Martin and I have for the worker.
Absolutely.
We both, all of us have degrees in occupational safety and health, many years in occupational safety and health. And I enjoy a good theory debate as much as anyone else. But at the end of the day, it's about getting workers home safe from high hazard jobs in as good a condition or better than when they left their families. And unfortunately, all of us have experienced serious injuries and fatality investigations. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the pitfalls of those investigation techniques that you may have seen throughout your career and how we can fix that. And we'll just take it wherever this goes. But right now, everyone in safety is talking about SIFs and PSIFs, et cetera. So here's my first question to you. How do we bend that curve if we don't improve the quality of our investigations?
Well, you can't. I think something you wrote recently about a systematic approach to addressing SIF really hit the nail on the head. There's no silver bullet, but one of the critical components to driving down incidents and to protecting our workers is when something goes wrong, and regardless of the severity, it's the potential severity and the severity. What do we do with that? It's a learning opportunity. And if we don't develop meaningful corrective actions and then put those corrective actions into a continuous process improvement cycle, it's a missed opportunity to reduce SIF potential moving forward.
One of the pitfalls I've found in my career is this pressure between the hiring client and the contractor if one of these events happens on the hiring client location. What I mean by that is, and maybe you've experienced this as well, maybe you too, Dr. Martin, an incident occurs, regardless of severity. I need an incident investigation, corrective action on my desk in the morning when I come to work. And I think that pressure sometimes leads to incomplete investigations that leave hidden risk, undiscovered risk, unidentified causal factors still laying within the work process. And then we see that particular contractor or other contractors repeat the same incident. What do you think about hiring client pressure to get it done quick?
Yeah, I think without question, it's incumbent on us as hiring clients to give the vendors enough time to conduct a thorough investigation, to identify those causal factors and develop their corrective actions. And I would also challenge all of my peers who are, like me, working for a hiring client, that if your vendor doesn't have the resources and respective of compliance with your legal department's requirements, without doing it for them, we should be engaged in coaching them and helping them get better. Particularly the smaller vendors are not going to have access to somebody with your kind of horsepower, to do an incident investigation for them. A lot of times it's somebody who may be wearing a few hats. They may be new to the industry because of the pay scale available to that vendor. And so I would challenge those of us who do what we do to give them the time that they need. And if they need some coaching, again, without doing it for them, let's give them that coaching or point them in the direction of resources like those provided by Veriforce or other highly competent vendors that can help them work through those incident investigations and develop those corrective actions that we need.
That's one of the reasons I'm really glad Veriforce expanded its Veriforce Expert Services department. For years they've done deep dive contractor assessments, but now they've got a whole catalog of expert services, such as incident and accident investigation experts, certainly all the way up to OSHA investigation representation. All that was designed really to help that small contractor that you're talking about. That person that's got 50 people in their company that has a tragic event. Nobody wanted it to happen. It did happen. Let's figure out why it happened. We've got legal considerations we have to consider. We have the relationship with the hiring client we have to consider. We have OSHA often investigating that we have to consider. So, I'm glad that we have those resources that are available and encourage hiring clients to make that referral to some of the Veriforce Expert Services team if they see someone struggling. Many times in my assessments, one of the things we do proactively at Veriforce and also in my private practice, I know Dr. Martin does this as well, is deep dive contractor assessments where we're trying to identify gaps in the contractor safety management system prior to there being an incident. You know, Dr. Todd Conklin calls it pre-accident investigations, right? Where we're trying to be proactive in this measure. Many times when I ask the safety professional, what is your incident and accident investigation methodology? A lot of times they look at me like I got four heads, you know?
Right, right.
You know?
Right.
Has that been your experience?
Yeah, so it definitely made my list of the six, right? It's not having a methodical approach that's, you know, in your organization. And I'm not married to any, whether it's Taproot or Fishbone or 5 Whys or event and causal factor analysis. I don't care what your methodology is. It needs to fit your organization, and your personnel need to be trained in it, and you need to follow it. Whatever the case may be, I've seen all of them work, and I've also seen all of them fail because they're not followed, right? People will jump around, or they don't have one.
Right.
What you'll have is, you know, a lot of times it'll be, again, what are these smaller contractors, and someone in operations is tasked with writing an incident report, which is, you know, Chris wasn't wearing his hard hat. That's why his head got hurt when the wrench fell on his head. Right? Okay, that's a summary. It's not an investigation.
Right.
Probably missed a few things there. And so I try to teach that as a coaching moment with a vendor where I'm going to punt that back to you and say, we got to do better. And I'm going to give you some resources on, you know, that you could use to do that better. And then I expect a better result from you, right? I'm looking for a much better outcome. But yeah, certainly following some sort of methodical approach, whatever system fits your company. Again, I don't advocate for any, but if you're on a budget and you're looking for something, Dr. Oakley's book on accident investigation techniques for me is the cornerstone text to begin to understand how to conduct an incident investigation, how to identify causes versus conditions. Another one of my 6 mistakes that I typically see are pitfalls. So just a great foundational book if someone's looking for a resource.
Okay. What's another pitfall that you have on your list?
So the first one is blame, you know, for me. And in fact, I think today you actually liked someone's post. I saw it, and it was very well done. Someone had put something together about, you know, a guidance document on mistakes they've seen over the years in incident investigation. I thought very well done, and I wish I could give credit to the author. But yeah, seeking to blame, you'll find blame. Right? When you enter the incident investigation with the intent to figure out who did what wrong, that's what you're going to find. Rather than looking at the totality of circumstances, building your timeline, and being willing to go as far back as necessary and through the event in a way that allows you to uncover all of the causal factors. And some of those can be uncomfortable. And sometimes the finger ends up getting pointed back towards leadership, whether that's frontline, middle, or senior management, right? And so being able to enter the process with the end game of not blaming. Are we going to find out if we do a thorough investigation that someone might have done something that was a violation of our company policy or procedure? Yes, it's going to come out. But if that's all I go into the process looking for is who's at fault, then when I find that, what I've seen is typically people will stop there and go, well, good enough. Chris Martin did it. We're done.
Right.
On to the next incident investigation. Human behavior is the cause. So
well, let's make a distinction here, because I know James likes to talk about the employee misconduct defense. It's sometimes there is a modicum of blame that needs to happen, right? But blame should not be find it and stop, right? An investigation is to find all of the root causes, all of the factors, all of the things that went into this. And later on, if everything leads to that employee misconduct, somebody just didn't care, right? Then that's one thing. But you can't start with the end in mind, right? I think that's a famous quote from somebody, but you cannot start with the end in mind. You have to get it all out, and then and only then can that be somewhat of an outcome, right? That there
Right.
is some blame involved on a particular individual because they just don't care, and there's
No.
nothing you could have done about it.
Exactly. And
Is
most of the time, employee misconduct, unpreventable employee misconduct offenses fail for a variety of reasons. And probably the number one reason is that wasn't a true causal factor in the incident, right? Many times I see people jumping to this person didn't follow this policy, this person didn't follow this procedure. When in fact that I love Reason's quote, and I love to say it, that worker's actions were the lethal brew to or the final garnish to a lethal brew that has been long in the cooking. So, looking beyond worker actions, the one thing I'd say about blame is this. Many times we don't intend to have blame. We say we don't want blame. We want people to feel psychologically safe with our organization. But how we conduct the investigation sure feels like a witch hunt to James. Okay. I'm not going to name the operator, but it wasn't long ago that whenever there was an incident, they got everybody together, and then a high-ranking official from the C-suite of the operator would come and try to learn, and that's good. They would try to learn how things transpired. But at the same time, while they're doing that, they're cross-examining people, and why did you do this? And what was in your thought process to do that? And why didn't you do this? And it felt like it was blame. So I just caution people, be careful, even though you say we're not trying, we're here to fact find, not fault find. We're not here to blame. We're here to find out what happened to get better. Be careful about how you conduct your investigation and what tone it's in, because it's not what you say, it's how those employees feel. And if they come out of the investigation feeling as if all fingers are pointed at them unjustly, then they may not give you critical information that you need to get to a good investigation. All right, what's the next one on your list?
So confirmation bias is a big one, right? And I've seen that be more of a problem, oddly enough, with experienced investigators or people that you would typically refer to as an SME that you bring into an incident investigation. And I want to pick on my drilling and completions guys for just a minute in the oil and gas industry. Someone who's been in the drilling industry for a long time hears an accident, hey, this happened, and they will immediately in their mind formulate a vision of what took place. Not universally, right? I'm pointing or painting with a broad brush here, but they'll make up their mind what happened, and then they go out and they look to prove that they were right, rather than going out there and just letting the facts lead them through the investigation. They are what they are. I always tell everyone when I'm training incident investigators, look, whatever happened before you got there, and what you think happened, what you envision in your mind, and none of us can prevent that. If you called me on the phone right now and said, hey, Chris, we had a confined space accident, there was a fire and a guy got burned, I can't help but in my mind start asking questions and envisioning what that might look like before I get there. What I cannot do as an incident investigator is let myself decide what happened and then get there and look for the evidence to prove that I'm the smartest person in the room, and I'm going to prove that what I thought was what happened is what happened.
That's a hard thing to know. That's a hard thing to do.
I have trouble with that. So what I do, Dr. Martin and Chris, I tell them, don't tell me. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. All I need to know is you had a confined space incident and somebody got burned. And then there are other things about, whether this investigation is going to be protected by attorney-client privilege or whatever. That's a whole nother conversation. But in the bare bones of the accident, I don't want too much information from what they think things happen, because it's a natural occurrence in my brain to try to start putting it together, even though I don't want to put it together. When I do investigations, I think about them, man. I'm in the shower thinking about the sequence of events and the evidence and things of that nature. So too much information can influence the direction your investigation goes to result in confirmation bias.
So one of the things, Chris, and I just want to interject here, that I learned from James a while back, because I know he's been through several fatality investigations, really rung true for me, just made a whole lot of sense. He had a fatality, I want to say, James, you remind me, about a week before Christmas.
Yeah.
and
Almost
you
3 years ago, 7 days before Christmas.
you have to fly up to North Dakota or somewhere cold like that. And one of the really great things that I think that you said to me at that time was that before you went and looked at where something happened, where this fatality happened, right? You started from way off in the distance, right? You started from the top of the hill or down the road or something like that.
Yeah.
And your frame of mind went from macro focus to micro focus, right? Because in the mind of the worker is thinking macro focus as they're doing this job. They're thinking about the tasks that they've been asked to do. They're whatever, and the micro focus might be on, in this case, the shop in which it happened. But there were so many things that were going on beforehand that there were so many clues in that incident investigation before that person even got the truck inside the shop and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is something that I learned from James, and I wonder if that's something that you do in some of your incident investigations as well, as you go from macro focus to micro.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Always start from out and then work your way in and try to go in without any preconceived notions. And I think for us as professionals, as long as we acknowledge that we can have confirmation bias too, and that we may, find ourselves immediately putting on the blinders and going to the point of the incident, then we're more likely to catch ourselves and take this harkens back to a systematic approach. If you follow a process every time and say, look, regardless of what it was and how severe it was, I always follow the same approach. And if it is to start from afar and work your way in towards the incident, to interview in a certain order, collect evidence in a certain order, follow the process, you're less likely to miss the steps where you might find some of that critical evidence that'll help you get to those causal factors and ultimately corrective actions.
One of the things I think where investigations fail is we get people together, Chris, and we say, write a witness statement, right? And we take their witness statement. We don't interview them from the witness statement. We just take the witness statement. And a lot of times there's really critical details that get left out of what the written statement is. So how do you go about interviewing witnesses to get those critical details out of them from the witness statement?
Well, that's tough, right? So interviewing witnesses, and this is something I learned a lot from Paul Padgett, who I worked with for a number of years, just another brilliant safety professional. When interviewing witnesses, back to eliminate your confirmation bias, you hit on how you make the approach has a tremendous impact on whether or not that individual is going to share information with you. If you're confrontational or suspicious acting from the word go, then they're going to withdraw inward and become very guarded and probably not going to, or less likely to share information with you at all. So it's the tone you set in your introduction. It's the tone you take with that employee. And then it's using active listening with that employee. So what I think I just heard you say was this, right? And asking a lot of open-ended questions. But if you can't create comfort in the dialogue, you'll get nowhere.
Right.
They have to be comfortable with you. And then don't ask a lot of yes and no questions, right? Paul would just get on to us, say you can't say yes or no.
So I've actually been witness to James and another one of our colleagues, Brent Kettlecamp, interviewing some witnesses recently, and they create a very comfortable atmosphere, is what we just talked about, right? But one of the other things that they do, and I'm wondering if you do this too, and what are some tips on doing this, is to approach a question that you're trying to get an answer to in a number of different ways, right? And can that be done with one interviewer, or does it have to be an approach that uses two different interviewers kind of asking questions in a comfortable way from different angles? Or can one interviewer effectively do that in a comfortable interview stance Just to kind of, what you're trying to confirm is what the answer is, and is there more to what somebody's going to say, or is it really the answer or not? Does that
Sure.
make sense? Or is
It,
that
it
kind of a
does.
convoluted question?
It does. And so it's going to depend on the skill level of the interviewer, for certain. Some interviewers may be trained in something like kinesiological interview, which is going to help them guide the interview process. Some folks just have, a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence. And so they're able to read the interviewee, if you will. I'm not a big advocate of stacking interviewers across the table from somebody. More than one begins to feel like an inquisition right at one time. If I'm sitting across the table from the two of you and you're asking me questions, I'm going to instinctively get nervous. So
Right.
I'm a much
Right.
bigger fan of a one-on-one type interview, or at a minimum, sit at a round table or sit in a T-type shape where there may be an advocate in there for that employee as well while you're interviewing them. But yeah, I think it's going to depend on the skill level of the interviewer, and they have to make that very conscious decision to approach it in a non-confrontational way. And listen, the first question I teach people about interviewing that you have to ask yourself is, are you even the right person to interview this employee?
Right.
Right. I may be emotionally attached to the outcome of the incident if it's my own company. What if the guy that got hurt in the incident may have gotten hurt because of this employee, but I barbecue with him on the weekends. He's my neighbor. Maybe I'm not the right person to actually even do the interview.
And that's kind of where I wanted to go, related back to your point of pitfalls, is how you interview, who does the interview can contribute to the confirmation bias. And you have to be careful that you got the right interviewer in the right technique, interviewing the right person with the right questions. Leading questions will get you to confirmation bias quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to take a lot of caution. That's part of the interview technique, is not asking loaded questions, right? It's asking the open-ended questions. And then what did you do? And then what happened, right? Walk me through your thought
Who,
process.
what, where, when, why.
Exactly.
That's ultimately what we want to know.
Yeah, I don't want to say, and so then you did this, right? No. Now, I may, using an active listening technique, if someone says something and I say, well, then I engage the pump when I read this on the gauge, and I'm making notes. Okay, what I think I just heard you say was, when you saw this pressure reading on the gauge, you engaged the pump. I may ask that kind of question for confirmation, but I'm not going to lead them to that answer.
Right.
I need to use those open-ended questions to let them
clarify, but don't coach.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
So what's next on your list?
So conditions versus causes, which is probably my favorite one to talk about. You two have been at this long enough where I'm sure you've seen countless incident investigation reports where they say the cause was, and you look at it and instantaneously that's a condition and not a cause. And the way that I teach this to new incident investigators is, if you were to go to the doctor today and say, "Doc, my nose is stuffy, my head hurts, I'm having a hard time sleeping, I'm coughing." Okay, take a decongestant, take this, take that. Let's see if you get over it, call me back in a few days. So 3-4 days later, I'm back at the doctor. "Hey, doc, stuffy head, headaches are getting worse, eyes are puffy and watering. Okay, here's some more decongestant and here's some Tylenol, take this." If I keep doing that over and over and over again, what's the doctor treating? Conditions. At some point, I need you to diagnose me with a cause. What is causing these things to happen? So that's the difference, okay? Changing conditions won't always change.
Symptoms. Don't mask the symptoms.
Yeah, exactly, right? So if you treat conditions, you won't necessarily, in fact, likely won't stop that type of incident from returning, right? Or occurring again, and even in a slightly different way. This is the wonderful thing about the way Dr. Oakley teaches multiple causation theory and domino theory in his book. And he talks about it if you ever get a chance to go to one of his lectures. Whatever that cause is, if I stop it, if you think about a line of dominoes, if I put my finger on one domino and I knock them over, it'll stop on that one. But the reality is that behavior, that choice, that process structure, that engineering design, that material selection appears more like one domino starting and then the pyramid's out. And so every time I address that one domino, I'm putting my fingers in multiple places through this this structure. And if I start all the dominoes from being knocked over, every place I put my finger, I've stopped lots of other dominoes from falling, right? And so the example here is if we had a fire in a facility where we're working, let's say it's an oil and gas production facility where you have hydrocarbons consistently moving through the facility. And I hire a welder and he goes out and there's a fire because he, struck a torch inside the facility. We do our investigation. There was a leak of fuel. There was some sort of ignition that a gas leak, right? Maybe coming off the heater treater. Feed gas line was leaking. He struck the torch close to it. It ignited. Okay. I know what happened here. That's that welder. So anytime someone goes out there and welds, I want you to go and put a gas meter next to the heater and check the LELs at that gas meter. We now have a procedure to stop that incident from happening. Well, then the next week, somebody goes out there to power wash, and they've got a heated power washer, and they park it on the other side of the facility where the gas sales line is, and it happens to be leaking, and the gas reaches the heating element and the steamer trailer, and boom, I have another fire. You know what? We need another procedure. Because what caused that was that steamer heater. So every time we're steaming from now on, we're going to go test for LELs at the gas line. Do you follow where I'm going with this? Are you seeing? Instead of saying, hey, anytime there's a potential source of ignition, we need to identify where that potential source of, we're introducing a source of ignition where there's a potential source of fuel. We need to rule out that possibility.
Right.
Hot work, right? So that's an example of instead of addressing a condition, you're addressing a cause. Air, fuel, and heat come together in sufficient quantity, fire or explosion. So what step can we take to stop that from happening across the board? Hot work is a darn good process if you'll follow, right? As long as your meter's calibrated, you're testing at the correct frequency, whatever is necessitated by the job, that's a cause, not a condition. So,
I like to... I love Decker, right? And he's like, behavior is not a cause. Behavior is a symptom of deeper trouble within your safety management system. But he also clarified that statement. And he said, we are not talking about overt acts that can be sabotage, almost terroristic. People that I like to say in my country vernacular that just don't care. I'm going to do it this way regardless, or I'm going to turn this valve regardless. There's not a safety management system on the planet that can account for I don't care. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this out. So all those people aside, right? We understand those people exist. They're in the minority. Those people aren't causing the deaths of 6,000 workers in the U.S. a year. And nobody comes to work to die. So in these investigations, behavior and worker behavior and management behavior is something to look at. But do you find that many times, at least the preliminary investigations really come back to the actions of the worker almost exclusively, and that the almost exclusive remedy that you find from investigators is the corrective actions reframing?
Yeah, absolutely. And sadly, in 2 decades, that's rarely veered off course.
Please don't say retraining, right?
Yeah, well, that is the running joke. Is you'll see this. From our perspective, we'll see an incident investigation. Sometimes these clients will even, our vendors will even hire somebody really talented to do an incident investigation for them. And I'll get this fancy 12-page report with timelines and pictures and graphs and charts and corrective actions. Held, stand down, retrain employee.
Yeah.
But are you sure? Or
it's the hierarchy of controls.
Yes. Yeah, they're not addressing that, right? They're not working.
We're not even getting basic.
Sometimes I'm like, how can we retrain them, bro, if we didn't train them right in the first place?
Right.
No, we retrain the investigator in the hierarchy of controls.
Yeah, so I would challenge when they say, well, it was employees, behavior. Okay, well, what do you mean by behavior? So I'll put them on the spot. And the answers vary. I personally am a big fan of this old behavioral model. Overload, appropriate action, appropriate response. Define to me what you mean by behavior, because that's such a broad term. Behavior can mean so many things. And if you tell me it was an inappropriate action taken by the employee, okay, well now, where is the evidence? Where's your justification that the action was inappropriate? Were they trained? Do you have documentation of training? Can you validate that the training was comprehensive? Right? Has this worker ever been disciplined for this before? Has that management, whoever that frontline management is, what was their reaction, their responsibility? So many more questions have to be answered beyond the employee.
Right.
Amen. Amen. And here's another thing, right? By not doing the right thing and hierarchy controls into their processes and etc., we create behavior, right? The company creates behavior, right? And again, I'm just speaking from my own perspective, right? An employee may act a certain way because of the controls we put in place, the controls we didn't put in place, the things we supplied them, and the things we didn't supply them, the processes we saddled them with, didn't saddle them with, and maybe, yes, maybe training, right? But behavior is not as simple as they just decided to do it this way.
You know, it goes back to, I think Dr. Martin, they do what we told them to do. But we have to ask the question, why did they do it? And we're really good at making moralistic judgments. That's first. Nobody comes to work and get seriously. Nobody comes to work and die. If you design the system of which these people work, when I say system, I mean the envisions, the tools, the methods, the training, everything in there, where there's an opportunity to make mistakes, to be human, to succumb under pressure, to work 12 hours a day in the hot sun, having to drive 2 hours to the job site, 2 hours from the job site. If you can't stand an investigator in the feet of those people that do the work, you're probably not going to find all the causal factors to the incident. And that incident will repeat itself. And it may be a greater severity. So we're all in there.
I think I'd like to touch on something that Dr. Martin said, and I want to give credit to Dr. Martin. My brother, Dr. Martin, Texas Tech, who's as a doctor in economics. And he taught me about the concept of emergence, that order emerge, right? And whether that, all these legal decisions in the context they're in. Now, that context is their expectations, your training, your supervision, and accountability to meet those expectations, retraining, and direction necessary, then you're more likely to get the outcomes you want. But there are no policies. The policies are standard. Engineering is lackluster. That's adequate. But you tell the employee to get the job done. Order. They will do something to get the job done. Right? I know you're saying that's better than make it here. If you tell them to do it, they're going to make it here to do it. So if the organization fails to highlight all the things that you just reiterated, then that's the organization. There's your failure, that's accountability, allocation, resources. There may be a process design failure where we fail to do a behavior, take into account the potential hazards and exposures. But it will always get back to the employee. They weren't supposed to do that. They weren't supposed to do that. Then in my mind, I might have felt like the right course of action based on what limited information, equipment, training, accountability presented them. That's the context in which they had to make the decision. Right.
What else you got on your list?
So we kind of talked a little bit already. It's corrective actions. And what I see is either there's no corrective action or there are ineffective corrective actions. So again, I always tell you, if you're going to do an investigation, what's the goal of this investigation? The first answer you get is, what do you think? To figure out what happened. Can I go wrong? Absolutely not. The only purpose of doing the investigation is to stop that thing from happening again. Absolutely. Every action they take, every step in the process must lead to the implementation of effective corrective actions. And everything
many controls we can put in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make sure this never happen again.
Exactly. And so it is, then how do we, what's the standard we have to set for ourselves as professionals in an organization for corrective action? Right? What does that look like for us? And how do we present those options to management? Some corrective actions may be near term or short term, some may be long term, depending on allocation of resources, the time it might take to implement it. If it's an engineering solution, I could go to the engineering team and say, this is wrong. Right now, I've either they're involved in the investigation process, which is another mistake we make. If they don't involve the operations and engineering teams in the investigations and the development of corrective actions, much less the implementation. So they say it was an engineering problem. You guys got to figure out how to fix this, and the deadline is Friday. By the way, it's Thursday. We need an answer. So these things take time. It takes time to figure out how to do things correctly. And so the implementation of corrective actions, the most critical piece of this, give yourself a realistic timetable to figure out what the corrective actions are and implement them. And then the last thing is failing to verify their effectiveness or make them evergreen, right? So you put them back in that continuous process improvement, right?
It didn't work. It didn't work. Too many times. We'll finish there, Chris. Too many times what I see is we get a corrective action, typically it's stand down, retrain, it's ineffective, or we put corrective action on a piece of paper that has longer term goals and longer term to implement. But as soon as we get our hiring client satisfied, it goes in the drawer, we never think about it again, happy we're back at work, and we breathe a sigh of relief, only to leave that hazard, that condition, that causal factor within our management system and comes back to bite us. Well, I think this has been great. Chris, we want to give you the last word. You got anything else?
Gosh, thank you both. This is great. I love engaging these conversations, and I want to make something very clear. I'm nothing more than the amalgamation of all the mistakes I've made over the years and all the lessons I've learned from people smarter than me. So if anybody would like to reach out to me to pick my brain, feel free to do so on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll post my link somewhere there where they can reach out. But just understand, if you reach out to me, I'm probably going to return your favor at some point and ask questions, because I think the pursuit of constant growth is something that is incumbent on all of us as HSE professionals. We constantly got to be looking for what we don't know, what we can learn to do better, what we can learn from each other. So I want to compliment the two of you for the work you're doing, because I listen to this podcast all the time. It's been tremendous. So tip of the hat to both of you, and congratulations for what you've done so far. And I look forward to seeing what you can do with this moving forward.
Thanks, Chris, for everything you do. We really appreciate you too. And I agree with you. If you went up on the elevator under somebody else's power, make sure you send it back down for somebody else and answer that phone call when you get that call. So I'm going to let James take us out.
Well, thank you again, Chris, for joining us, and thank you to all of our listeners like Chris on the Risk Matrix. Hey, if you're a listener, want to be on the podcast, hit us up. We're always looking for cool guests. But thank you for following us over there on YouTube, on Spotify. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. Look for our episodes drop every Tuesday, somewhere around lunch. And until next time, y'all keep bringing those workers home safe.